William Howard Taft was a career public servant, lawyer, 27th President of the United States and the 10th Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Born on September 15, 1857 in the Taft family home on Auburn Avenue in Cincinnati, he is the only person who has ever served as President of the U.S. and Chief Justice of the U.S. William Howard Taft was elected the 27th President of the United States, 1909 to 1913, and later became the 10th Chief Justice of the United States, 1921 to 1930, the only person to have served in both of these offices. Distinguished jurist, effective administrator, but poor politician, William Howard Taft spent 4 uncomfortable years in the White House. Large, jovial, conscientious, he was caught in the intense battles between progressives and conservatives, and got scant credit for the achievements of his administration. Born in 1857, the son of a distinguished judge, he graduated from Yale, and returned to Cincinnati to study and practice law. He rose in politics through Republican judiciary appointments, through his own competence and availability, and because, as he once wrote facetiously, he always had his plate the right side up when offices were falling. But Taft much preferred law to politics. He was appointed a federal circuit judge at 34. He aspired to be a member of the Supreme Court, but his wife, Helen Herron Taft, held other ambitions for him. His route to the White House was via administrative posts. President McKinley sent him to the Philippines in 1900 as chief civil administrator. Sympathetic toward the Filipinos, he improved the economy, built roads and schools, and gave the people at least some participation in government. President Roosevelt made him Secretary of War, and by 1907 had decided that Taft should be his successor. The Republican convention nominated him the next year. Taft disliked the campaign, one of the most uncomfortable 4 months of my life. But he pledged his loyalty to the Roosevelt program, popular in the West, while his brother Charles reassured Eastern Republicans. William Jennings Bryan, running on the Democratic ticket for a 3rd time, complained that he was having to oppose 2 candidates, a Western progressive Taft and an Eastern conservative Taft. Progressives were pleased with Taft's election. Roosevelt has cut enough hay, they said, Taft is the man to put it into the barn. Conservatives were delighted to be rid of Roosevelt, the Mad Messiah. Taft recognized that his techniques would differ from those of his predecessor. Unlike Roosevelt, Taft did not believe in the stretching of presidential powers. He once commented that Roosevelt ought more often to have admitted the legal way of reaching the same ends. Taft alienated many liberal Republicans who later formed the Progressive Party, by defending the Payne-Aldrich Act, which unexpectedly continued high tariff rates. A trade agreement with Canada, which Taft pushed through Congress, would have pleased Eastern advocates of a low tariff, but the Canadians rejected it. He further antagonized progressives by upholding his Secretary of the Interior, accused of failing to carry out Roosevelt's conservation policies. In the angry progressive onslaught against him, little attention was paid to the fact that his administration initiated 80 antitrust suits and that Congress submitted to the states amendments for a federal income tax and the direct election of senators. A postal savings system was established, and the Interstate Commerce Commission was directed to set railroad rates. In 1912, when the Republicans renominated Taft, Roosevelt bolted the party to lead the progressives, thus guaranteeing the election of Woodrow Wilson. Taft, free of the presidency, served as professor of law at Yale until President Harding made him Chief Justice of the United States, a position he held until just before his death in 1930. To Taft, the appointment was his greatest honor. He wrote, "I don't remember that I ever was president." William Howard Taft, September 15, 1857 to March 8, 1930, was the 27th President of the United States, serving from 1909 to 1913, and the 10th Chief Justice of the United States, serving from 1921 to 1930, the only person to have held both offices. Taft was elected president in 1908, the chosen successor of Theodore Roosevelt, but was defeated for re-election in 1912 by Woodrow Wilson after Roosevelt split the Republican vote by running as a third-party candidate. In 1921, President Warren G. Harding appointed Taft to be Chief Justice, a position he held until a month before his death. Taft was born in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1857. His father, Alphonso Taft, was a U.S. Attorney General and Secretary of War. Taft attended Yale and joined the Skull and Bones, of which his father was a founding member. After becoming a lawyer, Taft was appointed a judge while still in his 20s. He continued a rapid rise, being named Solicitor General and a judge of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. In 1901, President William McKinley appointed Taft civilian governor of the Philippines. In 1904, Roosevelt made him Secretary of War, and he became Roosevelt's hand-picked successor. Despite his personal ambition to become Chief Justice, Taft declined repeated offers of appointment to the Supreme Court of the United States, believing his political work to be more important. With Roosevelt's help, Taft had little opposition for the Republican nomination for president in 1908 and easily defeated William Jennings Bryan for the presidency in that November's election. In the White House, he focused on East Asia more than European affairs and repeatedly intervened to prop up or remove Latin American governments. Taft sought reductions to trade tariffs, then a major source of governmental income, but the resulting bill was heavily influenced by special interests. His administration was filled with conflict between the Republican Party's conservative wing, with which Taft often sympathized, and its progressive wing, toward which Roosevelt moved more and more. Controversies over conservation and antitrust cases filed by the Taft administration served to further separate the two men. Roosevelt challenged Taft for renomination in 1912. Taft used his control of the party machinery to gain a bare majority of delegates and Roosevelt bolted the party. The split left Taft with little chance of re-election, and he took only Utah and Vermont in Wilson's victory. After leaving office, Taft returned to Yale as a professor, continuing his political activity and working against war through the League to enforce peace. In 1921, Harding appointed Taft Chief Justice, an office he had long sought. Chief Justice Taft was a conservative on business issues, and under him there were advances in individual rights. In poor health, he resigned in February 1930, and died the following month. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery, the first president and first Supreme Court justice to be interred there. Taft is generally listed near the middle in historians' rankings of U.S. presidents. The inauguration of William Howard Taft as the 27th President of the United States was held on Thursday, March 4, 1909, at the Senate chamber inside the United States Capitol, Washington, D.C., instead of the regular East Portico due to a blizzard. This was the 31st inauguration and marked the commencement of William Howard Taft's only term as president and James S. Sherman's only term as vice president. As Sherman died 3 years, 240 days into this term, the office remained vacant for the balance. He was the last vice president to leave office intra-term prior to the ratification of the 25th Amendment in 1967, excluding Calvin Coolidge, Harry S. Truman and Lyndon B. Johnson, who ascended to the presidency after the deaths of their predecessors, which constitutionally allows for filling a vacancy in the office of vice president, and as of 2024, is also the most recent vice president to die in office. Taft is remembered as the heaviest president. He was 5 feet 11 inches, 1.80 m, tall, and his weight peaked at 335 to 340 pounds, 152 to 154 kilograms, toward the end of his presidency, although by 1929 he weighed 244 pounds, 111 kilograms. By the time Taft became Chief Justice in 1921, his health was starting to decline, and he carefully planned a fitness regimen, walking 3 miles, 4.8 kilometers, from his home to the Capitol each day. When he walked back, he would usually go by way of Connecticut Avenue and use a particular crossing over Rock Creek. After his death, the crossing was named the Taft Bridge. Taft followed a weight loss program and hired the British Dr. N. E. York Davies as a dietary advisor. The two men corresponded regularly for over 20 years, and Taft kept a daily record of his weight, food intake, and physical activity. He died at his home in Washington, D.C., on March 8, 1930, at age 72, likely of heart disease, inflammation of the liver, and high blood pressure. Taft lay in state at the United States Capitol Rotunda. On March 11, he became the first president and first member of the Supreme Court to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. James Earl Fraser sculpted his grave marker out of Stony Creek granite. William Howard Taft, September 15, 1857, March 8, 1930, served as America's 27th president between March 4, 1909, and March 4, 1913. His time in office was known for his use of dollar diplomacy to help American business interests overseas. He also has the distinction of being the only president to later serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. Taft was born on September 15, 1857, in Cincinnati, Ohio. His father was a lawyer and helped found the Republican Party in Cincinnati. Taft attended a public school in Cincinnati. He then went to Woodward High School before attending Yale University in 1874, where he graduated second in his class. He attended the University of Cincinnati Law School, 1878-80, and was admitted to the bar in 1880. Taft was born to Alphonso Taft and Louisa Maria Torrey. His father was a lawyer and public official who had served as President Ulysses S. Grant's Secretary of War. Taft had two half-brothers, two brothers, and one sister. On June 19, 1886, Taft married Helen Herron. She was the daughter of an important judge in Cincinnati. Together they had two sons, Robert Alphonso and Charles Phelps, and one daughter, Helen Herron Taft Manning. Taft became the assistant prosecutor in Hamilton County, Ohio upon graduation. He served in that capacity until 1882 and then practiced law in Cincinnati. He became a judge in 1887, U.S. Solicitor General in 1890, and judge of the 6th U.S. Circuit Court in 1892. He taught law from 1896 to 1900, then was Commissioner and then Governor General of the Philippines, 1900 to 1904. He then was Secretary of War under President Theodore Roosevelt, 1904-08. In 1908, Taft was supported by Roosevelt to run for president. He became the Republican nominee with James Sherman as his vice president. He was opposed by William Jennings Bryan in a campaign that was about personality more than issues. Taft won with 52% of the popular vote. In 1909, the Payne-Aldrich Tariff Act passed. This changed the tariff rates from 46 to 41%. It upset both the Democrats and the progressive Republicans who felt that it was just a token change. One of Taft's key policies was known as dollar diplomacy. This was the idea that America would use the military and diplomacy to help promote U.S. business interests overseas. For example, in 1912 Taft sent Marines to Nicaragua to help stop a rebellion against the government because it was friendly to American business interests. Following Roosevelt into office, Taft continued to enforce antitrust laws. He was key in bringing down the Standard Oil Company in 1911. Also during Taft's term in office, the 16th Amendment was passed, allowing the U.S. to collect income taxes. Taft was defeated for re-election when Roosevelt stepped in and formed a rival party called the Bull Moose Party, allowing Democrat Woodrow Wilson to win. He became a law professor at Yale, 1913-21. In 1921, Taft got his long-desired wish to become Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, where he served until 1 month before his death. He died on March 8, 1930, at home. Taft was important for continuing Roosevelt's antitrust actions. Further, his dollar diplomacy increased the actions that America would take to help protect its business interests. During his time in office, the last two contiguous states were added to the Union, bringing the total up to 48 states. Thank you for watching this video.